This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It is time for Ask the Rabbi. Live this morning from our WPSL helicopter with no rotors. Good.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, the flying low. When I was a pilot, we used to say you've done too much instrument flying when you go into a valley and hit the fog and look at your dashboard in your car. It's a clue things have been just a little bit out of balance.
Just a little bit, yes. So how are you?
I am great, and I do love that our technology allows me to do this. I'm still 3 blocks from the studio, not far, but we'll be live in the studio very shortly. But as you said, we're in the helicopter now, and we are coming up on the tail end of Passover, Pesach, and that's a good thing for a lot of people who are getting tired of cardboard. Well, I actually like matzah, and I will tell everyone that my new puppy actually likes matzah as well.
Yes. Well, you know, is it really a true matzah, or is it Nutrisystem?
No, it's true matzah. It's true matzah. Now, the beautiful thing about matzah is when I was growing up, there was like one box of matzah. You had a choice of the American manufacturers of Manischewitz and Streitz. And nowadays, there's like about 15 different manufacturers. Matzah is imported from Israel. It's Yehuda and King David and Osem and a whole bunch of different brands. And they actually have different flavors, which is kind of interesting. And you also can get whole wheat. You can get organic, not organic. You can get spelt. You can get rye. There's so many different kinds of matzah.
So how do you do that with flavors and keep it pure?
Well, because if you're doing rye, you're doing it with rye flour. If you're doing it with spelt, you're doing it with spelt flour.
Okay, gotcha.
And and whole wheat is just a different way of milling the flour prior to the mixing and the baking. Right. So not a lot of difference that way. There's not much difference in the process once it's flour. You've got 18 minutes from when the water and the flour mix to have it baked. So it's a really fast process. The idea being that that way you don't have any yeast have a chance to get in there.
Okay, I gotcha.
That's what they're after, and you can do different kinds of flour. There are 5 grains that can be used for matzah. It's the grains that are mentioned in scriptures that grew in Israel. More things grow there now because the whole world has kind of like shifted what we grow everywhere, which is good. That way we get more variety. And so it was wheat, spelt, rye, oats, and barley. And you can now get matzah in all of those flavors. As I said, you can get whole wheat, you can get organic or not organic, and different manufacturers.
So
many different choices of matzah.
Can I get Fruit Loops matzah?
Almost. It's called egg matzah.
Oh, my. Are you kidding?
You can get egg matzah. So
egg matzah.
Egg matzah. A lot of people like it. It doesn't actually work for Passover. It's not considered valid. But,
I was
what
going to
can
say,
I
I didn't think that would be.
Yeah, no, it's not. I was going to do this fancy thing of doing Facebook on my laptop, but I don't have it set up, so forget that concept.
You'll be on YouTube.
There you go. I definitely will be on YouTube.
And when you started last week on the phone, Cliff managed to put together a montage of your website. So, yeah, it's actually kind of cool. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So we're going to start it right here. Hi, everyone. And now we're in the studio. See how wonderful that worked?
Amazing.
Yeah, the joys of technology. Let me get the mic a little bit lower. There we go. And we are set. Yay, love technology. Okay, so as I said, you can get many different kinds of matzah. You can get noodles that are made kosher for Passover. You can get cereals that are made kosher for Passover. You can get very, very dry brownies. You can get cakes.
Cardboard brownies,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so they've got all kinds of things. They've got jelly rolls. They've got all kinds of candy.
But like you could eat chocolate?
Of course.
Of course, okay.
There's nothing in chocolate. Now, some chocolate bars are not going to be kosher for Passover, depending on what's included in the chocolate bar.
There you go.
Right, because
yeah.
you mix things in. And also, not as critical today because now there's more leeway. The rabbis have gotten together and said that, we're not going to do this thing about something called kitniot. Kitniot means little things. And it was the restriction of rice and beans and things that kind of looked like they could be almost flour, but not quite. The things that people make bread out of. And those were not allowed for many years, but the rabbis that govern the opinions have come back and said, yeah, we're going to allow that. So for the folks that follow those rabbis in the conservative and some other movements, have opened it up to kitniot. So there's not as much restriction. That opens things a lot if you can have rice and beans and peas and legumes, because for a long time that was not allowed.
Okay, you just mentioned something about is there a mega structure, if you will?
Not like the Catholics.
Like the Catholics.
No, it's not like the Catholics.
So there's no rabbis similar
there's
to
a
a
chief,
pope type thing.
There's a chief rabbi in Israel.
Okay.
There's a chief rabbi. There's a Sephardi and an Ashkenazi chief rabbi, because those are some of the main divisions. And there's very often in a large community a chief rabbi. But mostly it's the Orthodox that will follow that concept. And the more liberal Jews, no, it's pretty much more wide open. But when I say that the powers that be, I'm talking about the rabbis that are inside the different movements that make recommendations. So it doesn't have the power of law, but it's a recommendation.
I've got to ask you about a current news story.
Sure.
Because most of it is involving Jewish communities, and that's the measles.
Ah, yeah, the anti-vaxxers.
Apparently they've narrowed the New York problem down to one neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, you get somebody who's anti-vax and they've got influence. It's gonna carry, and I think that's sad. I think we need to use science to make our lives better. The folks who say, I'm not going to fly, God didn't give me wings. It's like, yeah, God may not have given you wings, but God gave you the intellect to be able to work with others and create airplanes.
Sure.
So, it's not.
Well, that's an interesting thought,
right?
too. Yeah.
We're supposed to use our brains. We're supposed to use what we've got to help the planet. Now, we can then have another discussion about whether or not flying is particularly good or bad for this or that, but that's a whole different discussion. And then we get into, the global warming, climate change questions, and it can just go wild off of that. So many different choices. But yes, I've always been concerned whenever you've got a person of considerable influence who, perhaps read some of that faulty science. It wasn't, it wasn't a good study. It's been debunked, the anti-vaxxers. So nothing like feeding on people's fear for a little bit of fame. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, and Sarah is on the Newsmaker line for you, Rabbi. Good morning, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Rabbi. As you're talking about matzahs, I'm sitting here eating unsalted Jerusalem baked matzahs.
There you go.
Yes, and up in the upper right-hand corner, it says not for Passover use, and it says challah has been taken. Could you explain that to me? I'm not familiar.
Okay, challah has been taken. When you buy a loaf of egg bread during the other 50 weeks, or 50 some odd weeks of the year, depending on how many weeks in that year, and it's called challah, but it's really not the bread that you eat that's challah. Challah is the portion that's taken away and burned in the making of it. It's the one sacrifice, if you will, that we still do. We take a handful of the dough and don't use it so that we're not using everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a recognition that we have more than enough. And so that's what it means. It means that has been taken so that you can use that matzah to say the prayer for motzi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for explaining that to me.
No problem. And the reason that it says not for Passover is that it either may have something in it that doesn't fit with Passover, or it may have been done at a time when the factory wasn't certified to be ready. So either of those could cause it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Right, because if the factory's not certified, it's possible that workers might bring in bread in their lunch or something like that.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, it does say unbleached wheat, flour, water. Let me see. And contains wheat ingredients.
Yeah, of course. That's the most common. It's the most common form of matzah.
I buy different kinds.
Yeah.
I like different kinds. Sometimes I'll get salted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Bye.
All right. Thank you for calling, Sarah. And we are open for any other questions that anyone might have at 772-340-1590, 1590. And you might be listening to us on Alexa. You might be listening to us on Google. All different kinds of ways that you could listen to our radio show. And thank you for tuning in. And for those of you that are on Facebook watching, thank you. For those that will watch it later on YouTube, thank you as well. Appreciate all of that. So we are at the very tail end of Passover. And it was I was somewhere last night where there were all kinds of wonderful looking brownies and cookies, and no, I didn't get to have any of it. I wasn't mine. And I felt bad for the person who'd made it, but she understood completely. She actually took a piece of matzah from my box, which is what I was munching on. So, it's only a week. You can definitely survive. There's plenty of good food. And, I guess some years I've done the thing of the, fake noodles and the fake breakfasts and all of the stuff that they have. The cakes and the cookies I do just because I'm not going to sit and bake everything.
Now, what about fruits and vegetables?
Fruits and vegetables are fine.
Okay.
When the kidney oat restriction was in, you couldn't have peas and legumes and corn.
Okay, what's the rationale there?
Well, because those were things that could be used to look like bread.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that somebody might look at it and think, oh, they don't really have the restriction. But if you're going to make noodles that are kosher for Passover, if you're going to make Cocoa Puffs of some sort, I don't know what they're called, but some chocolate puffy cereal and some Fruit Loop kind of thing. If you're going to make those, and they taste funny because they're made differently to meet the restrictions. I'd personally just rather do a week on matzah, and that's my thing. Breakfast this morning was a slice of matzah. It was fine.
Anything on it?
A little bit of butter.
There you go.
There you go. And I shared it with my new little puppy Shadow.
Yeah.
So.
Who likes the matzah? I can
yeah.
see that with a puppy. Oh yeah.
Yeah, especially the butter.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yes, my husband likes it with almond butter on it, and he was looking at the dog who has white hair, and said, "No, I don't think that's a good mix."
Oh, go ahead. Ours used to dig into the spaghetti, and it was like,
yeah.
Gosh. Yeah, red face.
Red face, yeah. No, I don't need any of that. It's a beautiful little white dog. He'll stay white, hopefully. Oh, the joys of it all. And, but yeah, so there are whole supermarkets that sell Passover food as you come up closer to it. Passover cheeses. It's not that it's really all that different. It's just that somebody has bothered to certify that there is no access of wheat into the product.
I remember when I was working in a grocery store in Los Angeles and in West LA. And near the Fairfax district, and the sections would just swell during the holy days. It was like, holy smokes! Yeah. Oh yeah.
Now, the funny sidebar to me out of that is that here then we come up to Rosh Hashanah, which is a celebration of the New Year, and yes, it's a Jewish celebration, and there certainly are things in the store that would be appropriate, but matzah's not one of them. But yet the ubiquitous matzah shows up at every Jewish, Hanukkah, here's matzah. It's like, just what I always wanted.
We'll get you 2 boxes now.
Yeah. So, it's not say kosher for Hanukkah. Right. So there are other things that stores, I believe, should carry. I think carrying the cookies at Hanukkah time's a good idea. Just, Jewish themed things, just to balance some of the promo stuff. But latkes of assorted types. Now you can have latkes at Passover, at Pesach, because it's
latke.
Latke is the potato pancake.
There you go. Okay,
right.
I've had those. Yeah.
And in fact, during the year, I use matzah meal as the flour type binder in the potato pancake.
Okay. Just
because it tastes better. So there's absolutely no reason not to have it for Passover. And I'm not sure, but I think you can even get frozen ones that are kosher for Passover. I know there's a company in California that actually ships all over the U.S.
There used to be lines blocks long outside of Cantor's Deli in L.A. and in West L.A. It was just absurd. You couldn't even get close to that place.
Yeah. And our own 2J's here in the Treasure Coast, they make some almond cakes for the holiday, right? Using almond flour, that are exquisite. Now they're
okay.
And I actually
I did several 2J locations here on the Treasure Coast.
I did that last year. I made some almond things. I did some almond baking. This year, thanks to the confluence of calendars, I didn't do any baking. It's grades are due today at IRSC, so it's been a crazy week at the college. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, and other things in my schedule.
Graduation right around the corner.
Graduation right around the corner. Congratulations to all the wonderful students. And I found out I'm going to be teaching Summer 1 and Summer 2, Summer A and Summer B, God willing, and assuming the classes fill. There's always that rub.
Okay. Yep.
All right. One of the classes is already closed. It's so full that it's closed. The second one isn't quite that far along.
Now, again, which campuses are you going to be
I'm going to be
teaching?
For Summer A is going to be in Pruitt in Port St. Lucie.
Oh, that's close. Yep.
And then Summer B, just because it'll be probably down in Chastain and up in Vero, because, why not?
This is kill the professor. Just 40, about 60 miles apart, but that's all right.
I'm in the middle, so
there you go.
The only campus I haven't actually taught at is the main campus. I think it's kind of funny, but I'm guessing that it's just a matter of I'm willing to service those. I don't live right in Fort Pierce, so it makes sense for me to be at. Certainly, it makes sense for me to be at the Port St. Lucie campus.
Sure,
that's only a few minutes from my home. Chastain's not too bad. Vero's a little bit of a hike, and Okeechobee's a little bit of a hike.
I love the little Okeechobee campus. We were out there doing a startup talk show, and it's really neat.
It's a fun. The college does nice campuses. They really do. They make it comfortable for the students. There's a lot of student amenities that are out there. There's a reason why IRSC is the #1 state college in the country. I guess there's 2 #1 state colleges. There were 2 that tied.
Well, Miami-Dade got it simply because they have 90,000 students. Actually, it's more than that. They're over 100 now.
It's a huge.
It's mammoth.
It's mammoth, but but again, that's still all over the country. So there's other very large state colleges out there that didn't get it, that didn't come anywhere close. It's a.
There are more than 1,000 other colleges that were involved in the Aspen process.
Yeah. It's no small thing.
Yeah. And, we were first mentioned in 2015, and then 2017 made the top 10.
Right.
And then, of course, won it all this year. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So it's and it's been a steady moving up. And I think, people say to me, the schools in the Treasure Coast are not that good. It's like, you've got a chance in high school to dual enroll at a top college. You can't ask for better than that.
Exactly.
Some of it's got to come out of the student. They've got to get themselves prepared and ready to go to college. And, do get the grades to get into the dual enroll. What a deal. At the risk of, aging ourselves and proving that dinosaurs really did roam in our backyards.
And you're looking at one.
I really wish that I had that available to me when I was in high school. All I could do was a couple of AP courses and some non-credit extra stuff and things like that. And nowadays, kids can come out of high school with an AA degree. Right? So they can go 2 more years and have a bachelor's and be launched into whatever they're going to do, whether it's grad school or a career right out of college.
And you figure the dual enrollment kids will graduate from IRSC 2 to 3 weeks before they graduate from high school.
Yeah.
That's what's incredible.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
one
that.
of the funnier parts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
just
that's
the schedule.
Great. But you are right. I mean, for the student who really has got their act together, and I see so many of them, the young Floridians that I deal with, and of course they're all athletes, but they're all athletes with 4-point GPAs or better.
Mm-hmm.
And the young lady who won this year in our group had a 6-weighted GPA. I just thought, oh my goodness. And it was over 300 volunteer hours.
Yeah.
I don't understand when these kids sleep now.
It's become much more competitive. It's one of the Ask a Rabbi Stewart went to Rutgers, and he was blown away when he looked at Rutgers recently and saw what their entrance requirements are now.
Oh yeah,
everything has gotten so much more competitive, and kids have got to buckle down. They've got to be ready for high school. And it's one of those things that's part of what we have to do.
And what I really like about Indian River State College as well is they've got certain real high-tech stuff where the professors there at IRSC are dipping down into the middle schools now to attract those kids into like lasers and photonics and things like that. And those kids are like sponges. They love it. And, they have the big photonics camps in the summertime. My gosh.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we are lucky to have a school like IRSC so nearby.
Yeah.
And with so many different campuses that students really don't have to, break their bodies to get to class, at least not in the beginning, right?
So now you teach ethics?
I teach lots of things. I teach ethics. I teach intro to humanities. I teach human development. I teach psychology. I teach world religion in the U.S., and I have on occasion taught student success. That one doesn't make it onto the schedule very often, thanks to all the others.
So there is ethics in this world.
There is ethics in this world.
Hate to ask. But.
Yeah. Well, and it was kind of an interesting thing at the Seder that we had first night. There was a couple there, and the gentleman in the couple teaches ethics at Harvard.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that engendered a little bit of a discussion at the Seder. It was really quite interesting. We attract some interesting folks to our gatherings.
I'll bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you're just like the community. I mean, you're just going to explode over the next 10 years. It's going to be ridiculous.
I hope so. I mean, that's what I would expect. It's not rocket science. I drive through my own neighborhood, which was a third empty lots 2 years ago. and we have barely a handful left anymore. Where there's so much infilling going on, at least in Port St. Lucie. I'm not as familiar with Fort Pierce and Vero, but I would guess that the same is happening at any of the newer developments. And of course, I see tradition going up with all of the different planned parts of it. And there's a lot of different levels of housing. There's apartments, there's independent, there's gated communities, there's just about anything you could want, not far.
It was a very interesting story I was watching on Fox the other day, that the Jewish communities in South Florida and Central Florida were growing faster than any other communities in the United States.
Wow.
Which I think is fascinating.
Well, so you've got certainly a population coming out of the north that's had it with the weather and then
taxes,
right, and taxes and things like that. We've also got a Jewish population that's down south of us that as that population to the very south of Florida grows, that bubble has to push up because it can't expand into the ocean. So unless they really do an awful lot of reclaiming, and I think the Keys would get a little annoyed at that. But
yes,
you no longer are an island. You're now. No, I don't think they'd be happy with that concept of attached to Florida. I think they like being islands. So so people aren't going to grow south. They can only expand north, and you've got a couple of populations in those areas that are the type of populations that grow. And as they increase and bring family members in and create new family members, or as the birth rate continues. It'd be interesting to see what the birth rates are in southern Florida. I imagine they're pretty high. And again, that tends to push because they're going to hang close to where they were. So the folks that are migrating, if you will, from the northern climes, from New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and Ohio, those areas, they're not going to go as far south because the housing's going to get more expensive. So the up-and-coming place is very much the Treasure Coast. We're sandwiched in between that growing Orlando community and the growing Miami community.
In Judaism, which segment do you feel is growing faster?
Reform.
It is Reform. Okay, yeah.
Reform is the fastest growing right now and accounts for the majority of Jews. Orthodox is only about 10 or 11%. And, it's... When I say that I teach world religion, one of my biggest beefs with any of the religion textbooks is they tend not to show the diversity within any religion, right? So,
Gee, why am I surprised?
Why should we, shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's a natural thing. There's only a handful of textbooks, of religion textbooks, where people from that religion write the section for their religion. And there are a few of those out there. And I think they tend to be pretty good because they do tend to reflect more of the diversity. Right? So, all Hindus are not alike. All Buddhists are not alike. All Christians are not alike. And, I always get into that discussion because it's one of the first questions I ask in my world religion. Is or was the United States ever a country where Christianity was the official religion, the state religion?
Christian country.
Yeah, right. But because it never was a state religion.
Right.
Right. And then one of the reasons is the diversity of Christianity. There is enough diversity among Christians in the U.S. that there is not enough of any one to be able to create a state religion.
Now, in your student body, do you have Hindus and...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. On my average class, I'll have a couple of Muslims. I'll have a couple of Hindus. Once in a while, I even have just about anything and everything. We'll get a couple through, a couple of Jews in most classes. And, one of my favorite calls one time, because I require my students to visit a Jewish, a Christian, and a Muslim service
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well,
yeah.
because you can't smell the pizza on YouTube. and that's the point that I make to them, right? You can't smell the pizza on YouTube. You need to go and actually experience it. I'm not asking anybody to pray. I'm not asking anybody to do anything that's a violation of their own faith tradition, but go and respectfully observe and see how and what people do when they worship God, just so you get a feel for it. And so one time I had this phone call from a mother saying, I can't believe it, you're sending my daughter into a mosque. And I said, and and she says, well, she's Jewish. And I'm like, okay. Did she tell you that I'm a rabbi? I said, if she wants to, she can go with me on Friday and watch. Because I go once a semester just to stay abreast of what's going on in the different houses of worship. And I'm active in the Interfaith Clergy Alliance. So, it's one God who creates one universe. We choose to be Jewish or Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or Catholic or Presbyterian or Protestant or Orthodox, Reform, conservative, whatever flavor we are within our flavor. And, it's one universe. If one God created one universe, then the other religion can't be praying to a different God. They might be praying differently, but it's the same God. And so, so what does that mean, right? Because it's not like my God battled your God to create the universe. It's one God who creates one universe.
So how can you explain like the Aztecs and Incans?
It's still one God.
Still one God.
Still one God. It might be a different understanding, and it might be a different theology, but it's not a different God.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? It's a different practice. It's a different approach. It's a different understanding of what that God wants you to do. And that's where we can have the discussion. But it's not a different God. Right? If I theorize that your God is different from my God, then I'm being a polytheist. Right? I'm not being a monotheist. If it's one God, it's one God.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the question becomes, okay, you celebrate on a Sunday and you do this and you do that, and I do this Saturday thing and I do this crazy matzah thing during Pesach, but it's one God. If it's the almighty, all-powerful, however you define that, however you understand that, it's the same that. Right? It's just a slightly different view, and some of us cover our heads and some uncover our heads. Right? And, so there's differences, but the difference is not in God, the difference is in the humans.
It was so funny. I remember, of course, I went to school in the 60s, and the world religion course at Loyola University, which is a Catholic university, was taught out of the theology department. And there were a few people who objected that it came from that department, that there would be some Catholic brainwashing or something of their non-Catholic students. But what I thought was very interesting is that, oh my goodness, I think 65% of my freshman class was Jewish. Because there were no Jewish universities at the time in L.A. So they just all kind of matriculated to the Catholic college.
Go where you go,
Yeah. And it was fascinating. I mean, we had rabbis on staff. It was, of course, the rabbis from the big temples used to come down to Loyola all the time. It was really kind of cool.
Yeah. There's a couple of colleges right now, couple of Christian colleges right now that are advertising for rabbis to be on staff.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and
but I think it's very interesting. You talk about the one God technique and the one God, period. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. If it's one God that created and loves all people. And if not, then we're going to get into a lot more difficulties, actually, than if we start from that place. I was saying there's one creator, one supreme God, right? Hinduism, there's one supreme God with different emanations, right? Which a lot of people don't understand because they look at all the icons and
Yes.
call them idols. It would be better if we did have a little better understanding of how each other practices. I don't think anybody thinks that a little stone statue is going to get up and do something. And I compare that. Ask my Christian students, if you buy a $1.50 plastic Jesus and put it up on your wall, is that Jesus going to come down on your table and do something? Walk across the salad or something? Not likely, right? That's not its purpose.
Yes.
Right. And so to think that is, that works for a kid until they get old enough to really understand what's being said and what's being done. Now, do some people arrest their religious development? Yes, unfortunately, some people do. But we can invite them to start to explore and think about, what is it? When somebody puts a picture of Mary and looks at it when they pray, they're not praying to the picture. They're praying to Mary. The picture is simply a focal device.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's something to help you visualize and connect. And the same is true with the statues that are used in Hinduism. They're intended to help somebody focus on what it is that they're trying to connect with in God, because God has so much. God is so huge, so immense, that it's helpful for many to have something to zero in on, to narrow down to.
So with your students, do you find that some are a lot more closed-minded?
That's a nice way of putting it, yes.
Well, it's trying to be diplomatic here.
I got it.
You got it right away.
Yeah, some are definitely more open and some are less open. And some, get their minds blown in the process of the course. And I can see it, right? We call that the light bulb effect, right? When suddenly they go, wow, there's more than one way to be right. And that's the point that I really try to stress. It's just because I'm right doesn't mean you're wrong. We might both be right. We might just not be looking at the same thing the same way. And, the example that I always draw is I draw two stick figures on the board, and I do a 6-9 on the board between the two of them. And I put one at the leg and one at the ball. And, the person at the ball says 6, and the person at the leg says 9. And I ask the kids, are they both right? And although I will say that this is the first semester ever that I actually had one student say something like, well, that's got to be a 9 because it's got a curve. Or excuse me, it's got to be a 6 because it's got a curve. And 9s don't have curve.
New math.
And I'm like, okay, so, you not only do you posit one view, but you also posit only one font.
Oh, boy.
Right. So, so there was a little bit of a need to open up there. And, where do you come into probably the biggest challenges? I think some of it's where you're battling some of the gut knee-jerk reactions that kids have inherited from their parents. And that's where the biggest challenge is, because you're dealing with, this is the foundation primacy of their learning. And they've built everything on these stones that they inherited. And they're afraid if they pull one of those stones out or move it, that their entire structure is going to collapse. And, and the point that I try to make to the students in the class is, if what I'm teaching you really can do that, then your faith is very fragile. Right? Your faith should be based on your experience, your connections, your interactions with the divine, and you should realize that that's bigger than any of the little stones that you might try to build on. That you're, if you're really building on God and you're building on terra firma, if you will, it's bigger than any one little stone. and things can be moved and survive.
So how does this whole Sharia thing fit in to anything?
Well, okay, so most people don't understand what Sharia is. Sharia is simply, it's the same as halakha, Jewish law. It's Muslim law, but it's law that doesn't violate any of the precepts of the Quran. And and most of it's about civil law. It's family law. It's who inherits and who gets custody of the kid and that kind of stuff. What happens in the event of a divorce? How does property get handled this way or that way? That's what most of it is. And some of the most exciting things that I've seen in Sharia law are there's a way of banking, because Islam's got really strong restrictions on interest, how much interest you can pay. And banks want a ton of interest to lend you money to buy a home. And homes are expensive. So, most people don't have enough money in their pocket. And so there's some creative financial instruments that Muslims use so they can still give the bank the money it needs, but not violate the interest restrictions in the Quran. So it's stuff like that. It's much more interesting. Sharia is not cut off a hand if somebody's a thief. That's civil. That's government law. It's not religious law. And that's a big thing that people often do when they're looking at any religion, whether it's Judaism or Islam or Christianity. You have to parse the culture in which that religion grew up and separate what's culture and what's religion, because there's very big differences. Right? And in fact, the majority of Muslims today are not Middle Eastern, they're Asian.
Right? Oh, I believe that.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
And what's being taught and what's valued in the different cultures is going to be very different. Honor killing is not something that's Muslim, but it certainly exists in some Middle Eastern countries, and some Asian countries for that matter.
But how do they rationalize, if they follow their religion, the discrimination of women?
The same way Americans do.
Ooh. Okay. Here we go.
Well, seriously, right?
No.
Look at how we treat women in America. It's far from perfect, right? Women do not make the same wages that men make. Women are expected to wear high heels where they can't run as fast or fight as well.
Okay.
Right? And if a little boy, start it this way. If a little girl acts like a little boy, what do we call her? We call her a tomboy, right?
Tomboy.
And
yeah.
that's okay, right? That's okay. No problems with that. How about if a little boy acts like a little girl? Do we call him anything nice?
No.
Yeah, that's about the nicest thing we might call him, right? She said to the other people in the studio. Right, so it's not okay for a boy to act like a girl, but it's okay for a girl to act like a boy. Hello. Right? Right there is a clue that there's a huge status difference. Right? Women's work, the women change their name for marriage. Men don't. Very, very rarely.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's lots of things that we do with women, much more restrictive about how women can dress or not dress and what's acceptable. It's gotten better. It's definitely gotten better. It's still a work in progress. And, you talk about wrapping up. The Muslim restriction is not that you have to wear a burqa. That's not it. And you don't have to wear a hijab. You have to be modestly dressed. In fact, I know some Muslim scholars who actually are opposed to wearing a hijab in America because it's not the cultural norm. And there's a requirement in Quran to not stick out. And so, how do you? So you've got all these different things.
That's really intriguing.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got to deal with all of these different things. And I think that part of the wearing of the hijab is an identity marker more than trying to be modest. And then you've got Orthodox women who won't show their hair to anyone who's not their spouse.
That's in Judaism?
In Judaism, Orthodox women will wear a wig or a scarf to cover their hair.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And 6, the men cover their hair. And will only uncover it in a private area. Women have the option of taking on that requirement. So we've got all kinds of sexuality associated with hair depending on culture.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's
and,
amazing.
And if you want to compare a hijab, look at the old nun's habit.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
They were wrapped at least, I can remember, nuns that had just this little tiny piece of face showing. And
all the nuns I had in school were, they were
you didn't see, and
head to toe. Yeah.
And I was just recently, the last few years, a couple of years ago, down in South America, and it was jarring to me to see all of the nuns in their habits, because you don't see much of it here in America anymore. Very few nuns wear their habits, and they might wear it in their facilities, but you don't see it much out on the street
very
anymore.
few nuns, period.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
The number of nuns and priests are diminishing rapidly. And so there's some questions there that I think the Catholic Church has to deal with. Of why is that the case? And, I always start with this premise, and this is me. And my premise is this. It's a very simple one. God doesn't make junk. And I'll start from there. Right? If we are all God's creation, and I can't believe that God, in God's infinite wisdom, picks and chooses on some petty thing. That just doesn't jive with my experience of God. It never has, and I doubted that it ever will. And so, if I'm going to posit this loving God that I've experienced, then it's not going to fit with some of the narrowness.
It was funny when I ran into, this was in the 80s, my old 8th grade nun, and she was the hospital administrator in St. Louis, and we got into this. It's about women priests.
Mm-hmm.
I said, that's the one thing I don't understand about the church is why there aren't women priests. She said, well, we ask the same question. We can run schools. We can run hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
We can run hospital groups. Yet we're not qualified to be a priest.
And
So she was questioning that as well.
Well, and I think it has been questioned from within.
Sure.
'Cause seriously, what things does a priest do that are so different? It's administering the sacraments. It's the big thing. And God made both.
Mm-hmm.
Last I checked.
Yeah.
And but then again, I admit that that's coming from where I am and what I experience of God, and what I've gotten from those connections is that we are all God's children. We're all created exactly as God wants us to be, and part of it's that we have to learn how to get along with ourselves and with each other. There was, when I was a whole lot younger,
Yeah.
there was one of the phrases we used to use was, that men of quality never are bothered by women seeking equality.
Ooh, I like that.
You like that? Yeah.
Yeah, that is so cool.
Right, 'cause
yeah.
And it's true, right? Because it's only the people that are really that are afraid of losing something, so they're on the fringe already. If you know you're at the top of the game, you're not afraid. You won't be challenged. It's only the people that think they're marginal. They probably aren't, but they think they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's our own insecurities that cause us to want to other people and things, so that the field is narrowed and we stay in that field. And so it's but that's me. And I've been accused of being a little bit of expansive and inclusive in my day.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I don't think so. And so it's as good a time as any to bring up a quick point, which is that we've got Yizkor tomorrow, Saturday, the ending of Pesach, and that will be at 10:30. And if you come to that, please bring a memento of the person for whom you're reciting prayers. Yizkor is a memorial service for those that we've lost in our lives. And it's a chance to touch that window, if you will, and just open it up in the safety of community. And one of the rules that I have is that, what people say and do at Yizkor stays at Yizkor, so that you can actually visit some of those hurting places and do a little healing. So it's an important time. And we can do it 4 times a year. We can do it at Yom Kippur. We can do it at Sukkot, the tail end of Sukkot, do it in Shavuot, and again at Pesach. So 4 times a year, the 4 major holidays, or 4 of the major holidays, you can do this service. And so it's a chance to visit those things. Details are on the website, www.eitzchaim.org, or you can catch us on Facebook at Congregation Eitz Chaim, and I think it's Eitz Chaim PSL on Facebook. I can never keep all of the addresses and taglines, but you're welcome to
social media.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So, then we have we're into the period now called the counting of the Omer. We count 50 days from the second day of Passover until Shavuot, which is the giving of the tablets, and not iPads, but but the stone tablets. Yeah,
the real tablets.
Yeah, I have a cartoon. Mel Brooks notwithstanding, of Moses walking down with 2 iPads. And,
Yes.
Right. But just imagine, right? It's the ultimate, as my dean of my rabbinical college said, it's the ultimate zip file from God, and we're still unpacking it. And so, so I wish everyone, I hope that people who celebrate Easter had a great Easter. I wish for our Muslim community and friends that they have a blessed Ramadan coming up here. And may we, the Jews, have a gentle journey through the Omer to Shavuot. So wishing happy holidays to everyone. Once again, a great confluence of many different holidays. And to anybody that I didn't mention your holiday, I hope you have a great one. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb, and this has been Ask a Rabbi, and you certainly are welcome to call, although we're out of time now for calls, but you can call next week at 772-340-1590 and catch me, Rabbi Shafir Loeb, on WPSL, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
Boy, I want to enroll in your class now. That's very interesting. See you next week.
Take care. Thank you all.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL Port St. Lucie, WPSL Worldwide on Alexa and Google Home.